Hey everybody, it is Traci Chen, your favorite immigration lawyer, and today I'm going to talk about the 491 visa in Victoria and what's basically been happening this year. Before I get stuck into the video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video with people who need it. For those of you who'd like to get in contact with myself or one of our fabulous lawyers and agents, our contact details are below. But to also make things easier for you, I've also started creating mini courses where you can access exclusive migration on demand, and the link is below, courses.tracimigration.com.au. So the 491 visa in Victoria has been excellent this year. A lot of people have been invited, and look, to be honest, it is a lot easier than the 190 visa, which goes without saying. It's very clear why at the same time. 190 is permanent residency, and obviously it's going to be more competitive and the requirements are going to be a little bit higher. What we found is our clients who didn't really meet the 190 requirements, we said, look, hey, because you meet the requirements of 491, I think it's better for you to apply for the 491. They very happily obliged, and very quickly they got the invitation. We've received information that although there's a lot more seats and availability under 190 for Victoria, there has been so many applications for that as compared to the 491. So even though there's a lot less seats for 491, it is way less competitive because there's just a lot less applications in there. Now, before we get stuck into what's been happening this year, just a very quick summary. The 491 visa is a provisional regional temporary visa. It allows you to live and work in regional Australia for at least 5 years, and you will qualify for permanent residency. To qualify, after you get your 491 visa granted, you must live and work in regional Australia for up to 3 years, make a minimum of $53,900 per year. Don't need to be working in your nominated occupation, you can do anything, but it must be in regional Australia. After you meet those requirements, you'll be eligible for the 191 visa, which is a permanent visa, and this year is the first cohort of people who are eligible for the 191 since the 491 was actually introduced. So I'll be doing a separate video on the 191 visa. Today's focus is just going to be what's been happening with the 491 visa in Victoria. So to be eligible for this visa, you must have an occupation on the relevant occupation list. There's no specific occupation list as per se for Melbourne, but if you go by the federal legislation, the occupation list there, I'll drop a link below. Anything on those occupation would be eligible. You must have a skills assessment, and as you know, this is points tested. So you would need at least 65 points, and you know that you get 15 points from the state for the 491. So technically, if you only had 50 points of your own, the state would give you 15 points, which therefore means you would have 65 points and therefore qualify for the 491 visa. As you guys know, this is open to onshore and offshore applicants. The criteria is a little bit different. If you are offshore, you just need to meet the minimum points requirement, have the valid skills assessment, and yeah, that's it. You just need to lodge an expression of interest and registration of interest. For those who are living onshore in Victoria, you must be living in Victoria. You must have a minimum of 65 points. You must have the relevant skills assessment, obviously, and you must be working in a skill level 1 to 3 job. So you don't need to be working in your nominated occupation, but you must be working in a skill level 1, 2, or 3 job. So for example, if you're an accountant, that is your nominated occupation. You've got a skills assessment as an accountant because you studied accounting, but you're working as a chef in, for example, Ballarat, you'd be eligible to apply. And we have had many clients with that profile, so accountants working as chefs who are invited, and were invited pretty quickly. I know a lot of people with that profile have also tried to apply for 190. Again, not saying that you can't get invited, but based on the information that we've received, it just seems that 190 is super competitive because you're competing against people with higher salaries, working in their nominated occupation, and maybe even higher points. So obviously they will be prioritized before those who are not working in their occupation. So it's super important for you guys to consider that. Whether you're onshore, offshore, you have to meet the requirements. You would submit an expression of interest, and then you would submit a registration of interest. And then if you are selected to apply, you will receive an email from Live in Melbourne that says you are selected to apply. At that point, it's very important that your registration of interest and expression of interest actually match, because that's what they're going to be looking for. And for people who are onshore, you must be living and working in regional Victoria in a skill level 1, 2, or 3 job. You must be. Even if you claim 0 salary, you have to be working in a skill level 1, 2, or 3 job. It's very different to the 190. So for example, if you are an accountant and you're working, maybe driving Uber, you wouldn't qualify. And in that sense, if you were to still push forward and submit your state nomination, you would get a refusal for that. So it's super important for you guys to remember that, because I've met with a lot of applicants now who contacted us after they got their pre-invite, then told me, oh, I got the pre-invite, you know, this must mean it will work. No, it doesn't in this case. There's still a chance you won't get invited if they determine that you did not meet the requirements. If that does happen to you and you realize that you made a little boo-boo in your application, it is much better to just let the application go rather than push forward with it, because you could get a ban and that ban can last 6 months, which at this point, because we're in December, it means you probably won't be able to apply until the new financial year. So just remember to let that ban go if you have realized you made a mistake. The key thing here is you must meet the published requirements for the state, and your EOI and ROI must match. As long as that's all good, then you know you should push forward, and then you'll probably get a state nomination approval. By the time that state nomination is approved, you'll be eligible to apply for your visa essentially. Just because your state nomination is approved does not mean that your visa application will also get approved. There is also other things that can affect and trigger a visa refusal. So it's still very important from the state nomination to the visa that you check everything and that everything's correct. Some common reasons for refusal is maybe you overclaim points. So like the state nomination doesn't check everything. For example, you may have claimed the Australian study requirement, but you've been offshore and you didn't study in Australia, or you didn't study at least 92 weeks over 16 calendar months, which is the definition for the Australian study requirement. And in that case, you know, the Live in Melbourne didn't check that. That's not up to them to check. But at the visa stage, the case officer will assess it, and that's how you could get a visa refusal. And you could get your visa refused on those grounds for overclaiming points essentially. I was reading somewhere that this applicant overclaimed the Australian study points, so added an extra 5 points when he didn't study in Australia. He still pushed forward to lodge the visa application and wrote an affidavit saying it was a genuine mistake, and it was still refused. And it's very clear in policy and regulations, you can't overclaim points. It all has to be accurate. So that's why it's really important to double check and triple check everything before you apply, because it is very critical. And I know at the pre-invite stage, state nomination stage, it's okay. There's not much cost involved, but there is time involved. But at the visa application stage, there is a lot of cost involved. So just make sure you've double checked everything before you lodge an application. Again, I can't stress this enough. A couple of days, a couple of weeks, it's not going to affect your chances too much at securing an invitation. It's much more important that you have your application right. So take the extra time to do it. That is just my advice for those who are looking to apply. Now again, there's still a lot of availability, I think, for the 491 visa. So I know there are people who don't want the 491 visa and only want 190. But if you are thinking about the 491 and you are happy for that, I think you should just go ahead and apply, because the chances of being invited are good. And look, I know that it's like, oh, there's so much uncertainty, this and that. I think the 191 will always be there. Like, you know, the old 489 and 887, you know, people are still applying for the 887. And nothing's really changed about that. So I don't think it's too much to worry. Yes, there may be time delays, but securing this now is better than nothing. So once you do get the 491 nomination and the 491 visa granted, remember at the nomination stage, you did sign a nomination declaration to stay in regional Victoria for the period of your 491 visa. And a lot of people have been asking, can you relocate? To be honest, you probably could if you couldn't find a job in regional Victoria and you had to tell the state, hey, I need to move because I've been trying to find a job here for months and I haven't been able to secure one, but I found one in Adelaide. I'm sure they would understand. They don't really want, you know, people who don't have a job in their state either. But I think the priority would definitely be to stay in Victoria. And if you are going to move, you need to give an explanation to them. I did have a client who had the 190 granted in Victoria and got an awesome job opportunity in Sydney. He emailed Live in Melbourne and said, hey, you know, can I move to Sydney? All of this. And they said, yeah, not a problem. I think it depends on the circumstances. So they don't want people who are just using this to get their visa and then they relocate. But if the situation is genuine, I think it can absolutely be assessed on a a case-by-case basis. Now, we are coming towards the end of the year, but how these things work, it's financial year to financial year. So when the new year starts, they're still going to be issuing invitations to about April or May in 2023. So if you haven't got your applications in, you know, absolutely go for it. Get your skills assessment done, get your English done, and go for this visa, providing you qualified. For offshore, obviously it seems a little bit easier, there's less requirements, but onshore, just remember these specific things I told you, and also remember to check it out online, because although Victoria hasn't changed too much, just remember these things are always subject to change. So it's very important to keep up to date for this as well. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Our contact details are below, so if you want to get in contact with us. If you have any other content you would like me to make, drop the title below, drop the information below, and I'll do my best to get to them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.